Our economy is in serious trouble, and we need to find ways to break the cycle of bad headlines. I'm reminded of what Franklin Delano Roosevelt once said. He said, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." What a remarkable statement. It means that fear itself is often the source, not the result, of our problems. In a crisis, any survival manual will tell you that the worst thing you can do is panic. If you find yourself drowning, the worst thing you can do as the water engulfs you is to thrash around in every direction all at once. And yet, the best word to describe the recent response in Washington, D.C. has been panic. Almost daily, more and more proposals and actions for the federal government to borrow, spend, and tax are pushed forward. There have been so many that it can be difficult to keep track of the total dollars involved. Remember the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac bailout, which cost taxpayers $200 billion? Then the Bear Stearns bailout, $29 billion. The AIG bailout, $60 billion. The banking bailout, $700 billion. We were promised salvation lied in the $827 billion stimulus package and a massive $410 billion appropriations bill. I voted against them all. Thank you. And just this week, Speaker Pelosi was talking about the next stimulus. Let me be absolutely clear here. I was just as critical of the Bush administration with their panic-induced policies as I have been with President Obama's. Last fall, for example, I voted against President Bush's $700 billion TARP proposal to rescue banks in 47 states. I'm proud that Montana was not one of those states. I advocated alternatives. I publicly said that there were less drastic solutions. I fought for bipartisan restraint. But panic ruled the day. Like a drowning swimmer, we were told the consequences of inaction was to sink and drown. Financial experts like Secretary Paulson, Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke, and current Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner told us the bailout needed to pass immediately. And so, like a panicked swimmer, Congress and the White House thrashed about wildly, spent $700 billion, and sank deeper into the water. By the way, it's important to remember that no one was advocating inaction. There were measured alternatives that were never given a chance. The idea that it was this bailout or nothing is a false choice that politicians invented to justify their votes to an irate constituency back home. And as I mentioned before, I also voted against the $827 billion stimulus package. Because again, Congress and the White House flailed around like a panicked swimmer, spending too much money on too many programs that have very little chance of stimulating the economy. I worked on and voted for an alternative stimulus package that focused on tax relief, not only for individuals, but for small businesses as well. In fact, President Obama's own economic analysis showed that our alternative would have created twice as many jobs for half the price. I also asked the House leadership to split the bill into two parts. The stimulus proposals in one part that could be quickly adopted, the other proposals for increasing social spending to be considered more deliberately in the ordinary appropriations process. But panic again ruled the day, and we continued to deal with the symptoms and not the cause. The $800 billion stimulus plan was pushed through the House without so much as a committee hearing. The House even ignored its own rule of requiring that the bill be put on the internet for a period of 48 hours so you could review it before we voted on it. We were in such a panicked rush, we only had a few hours overnight to look at a 1,074-page document. So I'm not surprised to hear now that there were miscalculations. A typical example came from right here in Montana, where we were told that a $1.3 million taxpayer dollar were going to create 40 new jobs in the Flathead City County Health Department. Turns out the money will actually pay for another year's salary for 10 employees, with only 2 new people being hired. And while I don't think anybody was intentionally lying, we passed a bill that few people understood. So it's not surprising that the numbers are not panning out. In this one example alone, we came up 38 jobs short of the 40-job estimate. Where's the accountability in that? What a contrast to what you do in the appropriations process in Montana. Your process is thorough. Each line item is scrutinized and transparent. There are few, if any, secrets. When the committee's work is done, all the members of the legislature have a good understanding of what is being spent and why. That is a marked difference from our process, and as a result, Congress does not produce the good quality product that you all do. I know there's some differences of opinion in Montana over how quickly the legislature should consider the bill regarding the stimulus and how much oversight the legislature should exercise as the money is being spent. While the lack of transparency on this issue at the federal level and the questionable estimates of stimulus benefits we've seen, I would encourage you to provide as much exposure, participation, and comment possible during the legislative process and after. And I encourage you to do this by creating a broad-based stimulus oversight committee that includes policymakers and members of the public. As a former lieutenant governor, I know that the executive branch has an inherent different perspective from that of the legislature, regardless of political party. Both perspectives have to be involved throughout the process. And that brings us to today in this chamber, where all of us are charged with plotting a path forward